Good afternoon to you and welcome. We did let you know that we're going to be having a chat with a young guy. He's right here from Rustenburg, from the Bokone Bophirima. His name is Omphile Dibodu. He's in studio with us and we're speaking to him. He's a comic writer and the title of his comic is Young Nelson. So we're going to go into everything, the writing process. We're going to go into what the comic is all about so that you at home can get to know what is this all about, and maybe you might just want to also talk to him, chat to him, and get your hands possibly on a copy of the comic. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Billy.
Dumalang.
We good. I've never actually, look, we have these comic books in your libraries and so forth, and every time you see one, it's always wrinkled and, it's torn. Nobody really cares about comic books right now. But sitting next to a writer of a comic book, for me, that says quite a lot about where our youth is going in terms of creativity. Alright, young man, why comic?
Well, I think just looking at superheroes in general, we've been so heavily influenced by the US just from seeing, and I think Black Panther was like one of the biggest comic books where our comic, characters were, I felt like I could relate, but at the same time it really didn't hit home.
Okay.
And so there was a huge disconnect because it's like, who's going to tell our story? Superheroes.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So you could not find any connection.
Yes.
You couldn't relate.
Yeah, so I felt like it was, more for, Black Americans than Africans.
Okay, get you.
So we were able to see, that's us. But I don't think our story was told.
Yeah.
And with the nuances that are in South Africa and in Africa.
Yeah.
So then it had us ask ourselves that question, like who's telling our story? Who can we relate, resonate with, and see? And so the comic book is actually a project that my brother and I are working on. So he, along with the theme song that hopefully you guys will hear soon enough, the comic book came from the song. So he was reading a lot of Nelson Mandela quotes, and one of them is, sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. Generation. So you'll hear him in the song talk about those types of ideas. And so once he had done the song, he let it sit there for a while, and afterwards he just started looking at the title, Young Nelson, which was the theme song. And he was thinking, can I turn this into a character, into a person that people can resonate with, that can create acts of heroism. And so he sat down with me with the idea and said, hey, I'm thinking of this, and I'm an artist, so that's where I came in. And illustrated it, and we started editing the storyline and trying to create something that people could potentially like.
Can I just ask something? Yeah. Who else did you bounce off the idea of writing and creating this comic book?
So our initial step was to go to African Narratives and Porcupine Press. So African Narratives is an NPO that just focuses on nurturing grassroots literature. So and afterwards, once we had Young Nelson, the character, he's someone that's inspired by Nelson Mandela's legacy. And one of the quotes that I think he follows truly would be Nelson Mandela's words to the youth, that it's in your hands now. So that's something he takes it upon himself to feel, how do I solve situations and instances in Rustenburg where they from a different perspective. How do I not just solve the symptom, but the actual root of the problem? And I think that's a lot of things with other superheroes, that they kind of put a bandage over the bigger problem.
When you talk about superheroes, who exactly are you pinpointing to?
With Young Nelson. So Young Nelson is a metaphor for young people. And again, in the song there's a line that goes, girl, you could be Nelson too, something like Sarafina. And he talks about how even a girl can be someone like Nelson Mandela. Sarafina, Nelson, like a young Sarafina aspired to be, as good of a leader as Nelson to some extent. And so Young Nelson is a metaphor. He's unemployed, he just finished studying. So there's a lot of situations that he's going through and saying, how do I solve this? The the things that impact the young people and the young person. So he's got ideas, and in the comic book, we honestly love to start telling these stories and trying to see what else can we create conversations about.
I love the idea that you guys have created characters that not only are imaginary but are in the living now.
Now, yes.
That a lot of young people that are graduated, unemployed, can really relate to
this is a young
characters like young Nelson. Why did you guys go into that direction?
So I think the biggest thing that we would like to address as well is literacy and early childhood development and so many other things. So we felt like the comic book was I don't know, like a good step to take in the ideas that we're trying to share and things that we're trying to teach. So I've been in study when we're having a conversation with David Phillips, who is a very significant person at African Narratives. He was talking to us about books and the literacy crisis in our country, and the way he was talking about it, it was like he took it to heart, and it also kind of started worrying us because you get into situations when you're young where you read something but you don't understand the content, like why bala, but when someone asks you, so what summarize that in a chapter, so that's why even with the comic book, like for those who read it, like young Nelson was strong enough, and when he's late and mama that's strong, whereas some comic books it's like English throughout, and I don't have a problem with it. Just like, how do I see myself in?
Relate.
So we felt like honestly, like the comic book was a good place to start. Nelson Mandela left us with a lot of inspirational quotes, and my brother was just saying as well, like if you've got inspirational quotes but you don't act upon them, if you don't do anything, then what do they mean? Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great, it would be a great generation. If we just hear it but aren't trying to figure out what he meant by that, I think we're selling ourselves a little short.
True,
we're not just trying to figure it out, so
I think we've gotten that. Sorry about that. I'm caught up in the young Nelson thing. So we've gotten to understand that the comic is about, as a young person, any young person will be able to read. A young person, let's say from Rustenburg, who speaks Setswana, or different challenges. They've just graduated and things like that. So within the comic book, can we say that it's just centered around this specific young Nelson, or with the different interactions that young Nelson has? Are there other characters, maybe perhaps, that you would like to let us in on?
They are. We honestly, comic books are still very young in South Africa, and we didn't want to do something so, elaborate that, like it just misses the mark or goes over people's heads. So we're just like, let's start with the character. Let's tell him who is he, who are his parents, what is he into, what's close to him. So there are other characters. So one character we'll be working on is a lady by the name of and so it's taken, from the saying that you strike a woman, you strike a woman. So, but with that, we want to do it a little differently. We want to actually see if we can get, illustrators that are female to try and illustrate this project. Because as a guy, it's very difficult for me to understand everything a female goes through. So you've got, characters that are written by guys that tell a female story, but they don't really talk about it, So as much as I can say, okay, she's gonna fight for this and this and this, I cannot put myself in that situation.
In her shoes.
But as a young person, I can put myself in the shoes of young Nelson. So it's characters like her. There's also others, but that's like the most immediate project that we'd like to address after the launch of.
Okay, you mentioned that comics, in terms of comic books, are not a big thing in our country. Everything is going digital. Isn't that a worry for you as a comic writer who still believes and still appreciates hard copy material, which is more, I feel, more personal, where, I feel like even now when I read a book, a normal book, not a digital book, a normal book, I feel like I can get into the author's brain. With digitally, come on now, I cope with the tablet in my hand, like really, How do you feel about this industry that you're in now, trending into the digital space?
I think it goes back to, I speak for most comic lovers when I say that, they love to collect. So I think that's one thing that we're also like,
But not a lot of people are still doing that. You only find like the convention that's coming up now this year, where you find only a few number of people gathered in one space that have like 200 and something copies of whatever, comic series. But not a lot of, and I hate using it, not a lot of black young people are still intrigued by such things. Isn't that a worry for you?
We did genuinely take that into consideration.
Yeah.
And also like our loved ones and family were like, look at it this way. But again, Young Nelson's still a very, and comic books are still a very new, idea. And so we would love to go and actually meet the people. If we were setting up a bookstore or whatever, we actually want to meet people and say, like, here is the comic book, here it is, please read it. If you love it, like, tell us. So that we get genuine feedback rather than putting it online. People are buying it, but you don't know who they are. You don't know their story. You don't know what moves them about the comic. So that's why we wanna like Rakobo and go through it like the long way and just build it from scratch. Genuinely get people's perspective on it, and from then on then say, okay, fine, are we gonna go digital? Or are we still gonna stay on this path and go into school and go into university and say this is a hard copy? So it's just something we strongly believe in, and we'll adjust if needs be. But right now we believe in hard copies.
I believe in that. What do we see in the future in terms of Young Nelson and Rainbow Nation Comics? What do we see?
So we genuinely do wanna keep telling proudly South African stories, proudly African stories, and we wanna have like messages that mean something. Like if you wanna be an advertiser, a marketer, or whatever, to be able to say, okay, what does it take to do that, to do stuff like that. So we just genuinely, like through Young Nelson, through Rainbow Nation Comics and future projects, just speak more about issues that address South African people.
And I'm glad Rustenburg Northwest young people.
Yes.
Because look, even with the pictures here, remember, Kogi, I was like, where was this page? I want to go on the page. I was like, oh, Platinum City. I can relate. For me, that makes my life a little bit easier, where it's nothing foreign, it's something that I've seen. I know this area, so for me it's comfort, like, oh, okay. So I'll try and figure out, okay, where's this now? So I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you and your brother. And I hope that you guys are going to produce a little bit more.
We'll keep fighting too.
The launch, we want to know when it is, where it's going to be. I'll definitely come through. We're going to come through.
We'd love to.
Of course.
Please take me along to the convention.
Convention coming through,
+1. All right.
So, okay, before we wrap it up, are you going to the convention, the comic convention that's happening? It's in Johannesburg,
yes,
now. What you want to see happen with you going with your first comic, go proudly. If only you could wear like a Rustenburg t-shirt, something,
we Comic-Con is an event where, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, some of like our favorite comic books started. So to be able to go to there and be a part of like that whole, process, I think it's just humbling on its own. So like we just want to go out there and, greet people, see them and tell them that there is a superhero like character from Rustenburg. There'll be people from Nigeria, Angola, other artists. So for them to take a comic book like this into another country and know that in South Africa there's a place called Rustenburg, I think that would be
dope. Whatever word you guys use. Thank you so much for coming through. And of course we'll keep our listeners clued up about anything updated in terms of Young Nelson, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omphile. I'm looking forward to being your +1.
Wow.
Playing in the background is Young Nelson. So I love the chat. Thank you for coming in. Time is always a thing, It's 1 o'clock. It's time for the news.